Of the three pieces, political, technological, and pharmaceutical, I would say that pharmaceutical is the most powerful of the three. But it was the coming together of those three interest groups that pillaged the world. Between 25 and 40% of all existing wealth was stolen over 5 years, and our lives disrupted, our communities wrecked, and our demographics utterly scrambled. I don't know, do you stay and fight or do you flee? That's a great question everybody's asking ourselves. And the fact is that you're not even safe in Florida. If everything falls apart, if we experience a second wave of inflation, which we might, not even Florida is going to be safe. So I'm inclined to say stay and fight.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for September 29th through October 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 1 ounce gold Philharmonics are just $75 over spot. Next, 90% silver US half dollars are just 69 cents over spot per ounce. And finally, the silver Australian Year of the Snake coin for 2025 is just $5.99 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have a returning guest who's been very popular with our viewers and subscribers. Jeffrey Tucker is the founder of Brownstone Institute at brownstone.org. He's also the author of thousands of articles in the scholarly and popular press and 10 books in 5 languages, most recently, Liberty or Lockdown. Jeffrey, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance. Today is Wednesday, October 1st, 2025.
Yeah, it's good to be here. My latest book is called Spirits of America, actually. It's an unusual book. It's not about finance or philosophy or anything else. It's about, I guess what you call like values, historic values in America. And the reason I wrote it was to celebrate 250th anniversary of the founding, which we date from the Declaration of Independence. And so it was broken down into 15 chapters, and it explores one or another American habit, value, moray.
This would be make good reading after people read America by Alexis de Tocqueville, which is a European perspective of what made America so exciting and unique from the continental standpoint. And now you're saying this is where we really took it. And I really like the way that you talk about emphasizing the date from when we declared our independence rather than from when Britain finally threw in the towel and decided to leave us alone. Because it isn't when the bully finally says, all right, I'll quit bothering you. It's when you say, I'm not going to take it anymore.
It's a peculiar feature of American history that we date it from the signing of the Declaration, and not even from the passage of the ratification of the Constitution, really, or any period in colonial history. It's only from the presentation of this the book of political philosophy, or this Declaration of Political Philosophy, which had these strange words that had never really been. They had languished in John Locke's Second Treatise on Government, which written maybe, 50 years earlier or something like that. And Thomas Jefferson took them and said, the following truth. So, we've already got a declaration that something is true. It's self-evident, so that's a moral intuitionism. We know it in our bones, that all men are created equal and have rights the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is a very beautiful phrase. And the fact that we can say those words now, and we think that that's just who we are, that's what we believe, and that's what we aspire to, is kind of crazy, because in 1776, that was a radical philosophy of unspeakable sorts. I mean, it's flew in place of world institutions, from monarchies, dictatorships, ecclesiastical governments, and even the problem of slavery in the U.S. was directly addressed by that. And Thomas Jefferson himself was an abolitionist, and he was suspected of being an abolitionist. And the founders signed off on what was essentially an abolitionist document. despite the persistence of the slave trade, even in those days. So what an amazing thing that they even agreed to this. And Jefferson himself was an unusual figure. I mean, he was a philosopher and an architect, but then also just a farmer, the closest thing that America had to an aristocracy, but it was an unusual aristocracy because it was a working aristocracy. I mean, he was a genuine farmer. He was like obsessed with farming, and a lot of his writings are about prices of agricultural goods and farming techniques and that sort of thing. So he was a real practitioner of liberty in addition to being a theorist of it. So in that sense, he represented the best that America had to offer. In contrast to European royalty, they prided themselves in never working a day in their lives.
Yeah, well, it might not surprise you that a number of our subscribers and viewers, and our channel used to be called Reluctant Preppers and now Liberty and Finance, are very interested in their boots on the ground, living with their heads screwed on straight and close to the land, and following that inner voice that is, in many people believe, is the wisdom of God speaking to us in the way that we're knit together, and therefore self-evident truths. In fact, even being able to talk about truths that fly in the face of aristocratic overlords is still a rather provocative act. You wrote an article that I wanted to focus on today called "Property Taxes Are Theft." This appeared in the Epoch Times, as do many of your writings, and that is near and dear to the hearts of our viewers and subscribers as well, because private property rights, you can take it as a very shallow thing, or you can take it all the way down to you have given up part of your life to work hard to obtain some benefit for that, and to save that benefit for your own use, either out of necessity or opportunity, or for that of your offspring at some time of your choosing in the future, and to do that privately if you choose to. And this has all come under attack, not just now. I mean, all throughout the 20th century, there have been either socialism, communism, or other egregious tramplings of people's bodily integrity rights, privacy rights, property rights of any kind, to their thoughts, to their words. And in this case, you talked about property taxes as theft, and what a abomination it is. Can you walk us through some of the key points? Because this has really struck a chord. It's very timely in our country, but why is it so important? Why are the principles involved so important right now and eternally?
The hook for this was really the movement in Florida to get rid of property taxes. They're doing so well from a revenue point of view. And of course, Florida doesn't have its own central bank, so it has to balance the budget. But they have an excellent governor who's done a great job. And they're at the point now that the property taxes don't make much sense. And even from a fiscal point of view, they're just not necessary. Property taxes in the U.S. have always been tied to public schools, which came about in sort of the 1880s, 1890s. And as a way for the community to fund its educational programs, seen as a public good. So we all pay for the schools zoned within a certain area. So all property owners have an interest in educating the next generation of children, whether they have one kid, no kids, or 10, right? So that was the idea of the property tax. But Florida began experimenting with school choice some years ago, so that the zones, school zones, and the tie between property taxes and educational institutions within those zones has begun to break down. And so they make ever less sense from that point of view. They're hard to justify. And once you stop thinking of property taxes as sort of a community, a tuition that the community pays, then it just becomes just a straight up tax, and it's a tax on property, and it's particularly egregious that you have to pay it as almost as if you're renting your property from government, and then every time the tax assessor comes along and says, "Oh, your property has gone up in value, now you owe more tax." We've not done anything because the home's fully paid off. You're just sleeping, living there, cooking there, and now you're having to pay more and more and more and more rent to the government. This flies in the face of anything remotely resembling property rights or American values. So as the public schools have begun to break down, the traditional method of financing public schools has begun to break down, and the public schools themselves, you're starting to see pressure against property taxes, and people are starting to express real outrage for what they imply about our rights.
So let's home in on several aspects of what you just went through. First of all, the notion that is it even possible we talk about the American dream. The American dream includes usually home ownership, being able to own the land under your feet and the dwelling that you live in, and to be able to at some point cease your labors and retire and say, this is mine, I own this and no one can take it away from me. That is absolutely in question, is it not, if the government can arbitrarily raise and raise and raise taxes so you can't simply just live there, because if you stop paying your property taxes, eventually the sheriff will help you move out and maybe throw you in jail. Your thoughts on the underlying fundamental message to all Americans about the ability to even own the American dream and their portion of it?
We use this word own, but it doesn't have any meaning anymore. For one thing, mortgages used to be, well, I don't have the money, so I'll borrow from the bank for 5-7 years. And anybody who did that was taking on a real risk. So, well, are you sure you should be borrowing? America, in its long history, they've always been a thrifty people, and bankers have had a hard time persuading people to go into debt and say, well, okay, maybe I'll do it. But over 100 years, it became absurd to the point that we have these 30-year mortgages, and people say, well, I'm going to buy a house. Well, you're not going to buy a house. The bank's going to buy the house, and you're going to pay the bank back. So, you're going to buy a $500,000 property, you're going to pay more than $1 million for it. Okay. Once you look at all the interest and everything associated with that. So, and you're not going to own it really for 30 years. Okay. So there's already that problem. I can't stand it. My own view is, people probably should rent until they can pay cash. Actually, they should, pay cash. But even if you own your home outright, you have to pay rent to the government. That's, like basically presumes the right to own it. If you stop paying, like I say, it's going to be taken from you. So you live 30 years with the idea that, the bank owns your house. And now the bank says, okay, now you're the owner of the house. So now you've got somebody new to pay. Now you have to pay the government, and what, basically rent? I mean, why is the government presuming to own what you own? I mean, it's terrible. Like, I don't think you can ever really have fundamental American style ownership until there's no taxes, or property taxes at all. And I think this is where we're headed. I mean, Florida hasn't done it yet. The legislature has experimented with the idea. It still has to pass. I think it will. But eventually everybody's going to have to adopt this. I mean, there's no rationale left for the property tax. It doesn't make any sense. It's contrary to the idea of freedom. And it doesn't even work from a utilitarian point of view anymore, because the schools have broken down, having been destroyed by COVID lockdowns, and now school choice. So it doesn't make any sense. There are communities in this country that live and breathe on the existence of property taxes, commercial property taxes and residential property taxes, without which they would be in worse economic condition than they are today. And this is sad. I don't know what the way out is, because it just so happens that in the communities for whom that's true, they also have massive problems with crime, terrible schools, falling apart infrastructure, puddles all over the roads, bridges that are weakening, terrible public services. Meanwhile, very high property taxes.
And typically a bleeding out of their most productive citizens that are leaving for greener pastures elsewhere and refusing to pay those usurious taxes. There, in addition to everything you just said, there's a nationwide and frankly international property tax scandal that's broken out this year. Mitch Wexler has been on our show. He's headquartered in Texas, but he also does investigations for Canada and the U.S., basically saying that, what you just said, that every municipal district, and including the school districts of all of those, have arbitrarily and illegally inflated the valuations on homes, not based on comparable sales as is required by their own laws and bylaws, but just by backing into whatever number they have to put on there to make their budgets for next year. So basically, overinflating and overinflating and overinflating that what they call the tax valuations on homes, to the point that moms and pops, they are like 36% of homeowners at risk of losing their homes because the amount owed by on the total debt of their district divided by the number of homes in their district exceeds the property values in those districts in like 36%. So they're simply unpayable. And as he has pointed out on our show, how do you unwind this? You want to do it in a way that doesn't destroy these communities, but this has certainly been a monster, a weed growing without limit or proper oversight. And it really does threaten the property rights of those involved. Any comments from you on that before we turn to some more implications?
Yeah, I think what people need to understand is we're looking at a perfect storm right now, because we have a housing bubble that makes 2008 look like just nothing, just a foreshadowing. Really, the house price inflation over the last 5 years has been unspeakable. I mean, in some places, just an outright doubling. Where I live, it's been an easy to say it's been a doubling in 5 years. So that tempts governments to just keep going up and up and up on their valuations. At the very same time, people are less and less willing to use the public schools because of all the scandals that emerged out of the COVID period. Some were shut down. Some schools were shut down 1.5 years, 2 years. People still had to pay for them. How about that, right? I mean, you're paying property taxes to fund schools, but then schools are closed, and nobody's offering you a rebate. So so after all that happened, then people had to pay a second tuition to private schools who are having to homeschool. This is unsustainable. Meanwhile, the parasitical governments are coming after you more and more and more with little pieces of paper that drop in your mailbox. Oh, guess what? Your property taxes are double. And in the area where I live, it's not unusual for people to pay, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And property tax. I mean, it's like, and this is just like throwing money into a trash can and lighting it on fire. That's unbelievable.
Now, there's one more aspect that I wanted to talk about or get your ability to chime in on, and that is the constitutionality or even the logic behind the notion of taxing unrealized capital gains. So in other words, if you own this home and they're claiming, well, your home's worth a lot, therefore you're going to pay a lot more. You haven't, as you said this sort of before, you said all you're doing is living there. All you're doing is sleeping there. You're not deriving any monetary benefit. You're not getting richer. In fact, the way that they're seeing to it, you might lose your home.
Yeah, I mean, you buy a house for $100,000 now. It's worth $1 million. I mean, are you richer? Well, I mean, your assets have grown, but you don't have any more liquid wealth. All you can do with your new assets is borrow, right? That's the only possible advantage, is it gives you more collateral for getting more levered up. I mean, that's not the same thing as prosperity. You've not actually realized any gains at all. So the precedent this establishes, and we have to roll back a few years. Remember, the Biden administration was going to put this in their budget bill.
Wealth tax. Yep.
Yeah. That so if I buy a fancy rug at a thrift store that's for $50, that turns out to be a rare handmade rug that's worth $50,000, a revaluation of that could technically expose you to a tax liability. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's true for paintings. Or or stocks. And of course, what they were really going after here was the holders of Bitcoin and other crypto assets. So that if you owned 1,000 Bitcoin in 2010, you have $1,000, but now you've got whatever that comes to, 10 million or whatever, 100 billion. All right. So, but from your point of view, you're just staring at some digital stuff on your wallet, on your phone. That's not actual wealth. So it doesn't make any sense to tax something that is unrealized. Well, I don't even think you should tax realized gains, but unrealized gains, I mean, that is a prescription. That's just socialism, really. So in that way, property taxes are kind of a communist experiment. Yeah, it began with a kind of, let's all support the kids. But actually, the theoretical basis of it leads to the abolition of property rights themselves, which, as we know, is one of the dreams of Karl Marx, as he made clear in the Communist Manifesto.
And has been recently reinstantiated by the statement from the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy. It certainly seems to be in line with that rather than what we used to call the American dream. Another aspect of this is the real risk to ordinary moms and pops. We've got this baby boomer generation that they count their home equity as their number one asset. They may not have saved sufficiently. And I know what the other thing was I was going to ask you about was the pervasive effect of intentional, policy-driven monetary debasement and inflation as a tool of extortion to thieve from people in two ways. One is the direct theft of people's savings by devaluing their savings and using that money elsewhere, that newly created currency that shouldn't even be called money. But the other is by then turning around and doubling down on the lie and saying, now you're all wealthier because the wealth effect of the debasement of the currency means in nominal terms, everything that you have associated with in your life is now more expensive. And therefore, we want our cut of that action because you benefited. It's like, wait. You debased my currency and now you want a cut of everything that I own. Any comments from you on that?
Well, the inflation adjustments have been a mess. I mean, they've ruined all of our economic data. We don't know what retail sales are anymore. We don't even know what the inflation rates are. But even if you're accepting regular inflation rates as reported by governments around the world, let's just say they're off by 5-10%, something like that. But the world as a whole took a haircut of anywhere between 25 and 40% over 5 years. The entire world, with the exception of the Far East, with the exception of China has data, I don't believe, but there are other Far Eastern countries that kept their money stable during the COVID period, but the rest of them inflated. So the entire world was pillaged for at least a quarter of their wealth. The entire world, Latin America, Western world, took a 25% to 40% haircut during that period. That was just between 2020 and 2025. That was a transfer out of savings to levered up governments, out of the middle class and poor to the well-connected industries and the rich. That's what it was. Now, you could say it was an accident. I don't believe that. I think it was all intentional. They did it under the cover of crisis to benefit the two most powerful industries in the world, namely digital technology and pharmaceutical companies. And they pillaged the world. They looted the world. It was possibly the greatest conspiracy in the history of man. It has unfolded before our eyes over 5 years.
It was originally considered conspiracy theorism to talk about that. People and journalists, independent journalists were deplatformed by the hundreds. Any article saying anything close to what you just said was either shadow banned by being downgraded on the algorithm so that people couldn't find it, or it was explanatory missing context was provided by a robot AI system that basically contradicted. If you did a search to find what you just said, you'd get the other side of the argument being presented to you in a curated result set.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is gaslighting to the ultimate extent, and the censorship began right away. It actually coincided exactly with the lockdowns. There's some precedent for it before, but mostly the universal censorship hit with the lockdowns, so you couldn't find out the truth. So you're being, held at home, only allowed to go out with a mask, and some places, 5 large cities in the U.S. were segregated by vaccine status. Our communities were shattered, networks torn apart, families separated. We had trillions of dollars dumped on us and invited to buy all sorts of new gadgetry, and then we get out of this period, and then suddenly we get dumped on us. AI, don't worry, here's your new friend, here's your new artificial friend. Let's use your cool new toys to talk to your new friends.
And by the way, they're going to be the only trusted source of the truth from now on in your life.
So yeah, all this stuff unfolded right before us. It was the most amazing plot in history. Mostly, I just have an article coming out here in a few minutes that kind of lays out the 3 big pillars of the plot. The first one was a political consolidation, and the attempt to crack down on populist movements in the UK, in Europe, Brazil, and of course the US. So, in the US. The intention was to install a military general as the new head of the U.S. government and deprecate Trump, the elected president. This is unfolded in 2020. And we have the general's name. His name is something O'Shaughnessy. General O'Shaughnessy. He was going to be the general manager of the government, military dictatorship. I suddenly I'm realizing that as I'm talking, your readers are thinking, oh, so Tucker's one of these crazy people who believes crazy things. I mean, what I just told you was reported in Newsweek magazine, March 20th, 2020. They laid it all out. The only reason it didn't happen is that Thomas Massie forced everybody to come back to Washington, and for a quorum, for a visit on the CARES Act, and that's what subverted the plan. But the guy was already picked out. We were going to have a military dictatorship. That was the plan. By the way, that article in Newsweek magazine was taken down from the website after the inauguration of Trump the second time, so it doesn't exist there anymore. But you can find it on archive.org. So it was. I don't know if you've ever seen the 1964 movie called 7 Days in May. But it's about a plot to unseat the civilian government. That's exactly what unfolded in March 2020. That was the plan. So, and meanwhile, Bolsonaro is still languishing in jail in the UK. Boris Johnson, who led the Brexit effort, is a clown in the UK. He was utterly wrecked by the COVID experience. They're still trying to tamp down populist movements in France, Spain, other places, and a guy like in Orban in Hungary is considered to be like this rogue regime or whatever. He's a surviving populist. The new government in Poland is hated because they have excluded the immigrants and so on. So there was a political motivation. So that's point one. The second one was this digital reset. The tech crowd, this new group of extremely well-to-do, highly intelligent oligarchs that are running our technologies now are untamed by any kind of tradition or manners or religion or anything like that. And a myth began to grow up among them that we're living amidst the third great industrial evolution. The first one being 18th century with the rise of factory culture and division of labor and all that kind of stuff. The second one being electricity and commercialization of steel and communications in the late 19th century. And then now's the third one. But each one of those periods required a kind of violent act to kick them forward, because humanity is too stupid to adopt their great new technologies. We're too slow, and that's holding us back. So we had all the wars of the 18th century to give us the Industrial Revolution. We had the Civil War in the U.S. to give us the Second Industrial Revolution, and the overthrow of monarchies in Europe and so on and so on. So we need some similarly globally violent action to kick off the consolidation of the digital gains. And that's what happened. I mean, the very first and most compelling article that came out about the need to flatten the curve came from a guy named Thomas Puello, who had never written anything epidemiological in his life. The article was viewed tens of millions of times in every language. And it came out in, I gotta say, early March 2020. And he's the owner of an online learning platform. So the article is a workshop for him. He dumps it out there. And suddenly in your inbox mysteriously arrives this article with charts on how to flatten the curve. You're like, oh, that's really interesting. And then all the money we got, we were invited to go shop on Amazon for our digital products. So you better upgrade your iPhone. You better get a new laptop. You got to try out Zoom. It's pretty cool to Zoom with your friends. And then after all that hell ended, suddenly we've got AI to replace our communities and our friendships. So that was the second part of it. It's technological violence in the name of technological upgrade. And the third part was pharmaceutical. They wanted to try out this new modified mRNA platform to replace the human immune system with genetic therapeutics. And they couldn't get it through regular means. They've been trying for 30 years. They couldn't get it approved because it's deeply dangerous and poisonous, essentially. And it also doesn't work. But they, after 30 years of investment and study, they really wanted to try it out. So they cobbled together this emergency conditions to get themselves not only authorization to use it, but then indemnification liability against any kind of damages they caused. And now we're at the end of that. Oh, the other thing that's great about the pharmaceutical piece of it is that the depression and sadness that came out of the lockdowns, people turned to weed and liquor, but then also to psych meds, which you could suddenly get with a 5-minute Zoom call with telemed, which is all liberalized during the period. So doc, I'm not feeling good. Well, have you tried Zithropro or whatever the thing is? And Lexapro. What does it do? Well, it sedates you. Okay. Yeah, I'll take that. That'll be good. So we've got a population deeply damaged in their mental and physical health, making everybody ever more dependent. Oh, here's the other thing. I think all the data indicates that the average person put on 20 pounds during lockdowns. Well, now everybody's fat. Well, don't worry. Here's a pill for that. So, these Ozempic and so on all become the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, second only to the mRNA companies Moderna and Pfizer and Merck and so on. So pharmaceuticals are running every government. And of the three pieces, political, technological, and pharmaceutical, I would say that pharmaceutical is the most powerful of the three. But it was the coming together of those three interest groups that pillaged the world. Between 25 and 40% of all existing wealth was stolen over 5 years, and our lives disrupted, our communities wrecked, and our demographics utterly scrambled. So that's where we are in 2025. We've got a gigantic mess on our hands. It's going to take more than one white knight in one country to fix it. Every country in the world is suffering right now, an unspeakable amount. It's a genuine crisis for the whole of civilization.
We kind of pricked, I think, a very important and rich mine there by just starting from the portal of what the heck are they trying to do, taking away our property tax, taking away our property rights. But you're saying, oh yes, there's been a lot more than that taken away from you.
Yeah, well, it's a good start. I mean, you have these little pockets out there where they're trying new experiments in freedom. And Florida is one of them. And God bless them for that. And I know everybody kind of wants to move there. I kind of do, but I don't know. I think everybody's dealing with this right now. Do I really want to leave my heritage, where I'm most happy, my home, to go live in this other place? And then what happens to the place I've left? I mean, if everybody has that, New England's doomed. California's doomed, and so on. Europe is doomed under those conditions. So I don't know. Do you stay and fight, or do you flee? That's a great question everybody's asking ourselves, and that's the fundamental difficulty of this generation. But the fact is that you're not even safe in Florida. If everything falls apart, if we experience a second wave of inflation, which we might, not even Florida is going to be safe. So I'm inclined to say stay and fight.
Jeffrey, we should have you on more often because you think deeply about these things. You write extensively on them, and you associate with a network of other thinkers and writers and people who are sharing their collective intelligence around topics that are deeply impactful to our dignity, our personhood, our communities.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because it's not as if I'm any kind of genius. I'm not. I live in the community of thinkers and scholars who are working on these problems every single day.
Help our viewers and subscribers know how they can find that community that you're describing.
Well, that's brownstone.org, and it's a large community now. It's a global community of thinkers, writers, intellectuals, scientists, who are spending all their time thinking about these problems, and I benefit from my exposure with them every single day. We support some of the best writers around, and our influence has been, I would say, very far-reaching at this point, but not far enough yet.
What you'd said earlier about Thomas Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence striking a deep chord that people could recognize within themselves. Not everyone can come up with those words, but when you hear them and something inside you rises to the call, it's very stirring, and you realize there's a greater battle going on here than, say, just finances or just politics. It's about the dignity of the human person and our place in the order of things, and not being trampled by those who would love to do that and are working day and night to make that happen, so that we can see the traps that are being laid for us and we can do something about it. Jeffrey, just grateful for your presence here. We've been speaking with Jeffrey Tucker, the founder of the Brownstone Institute at brownstone.org. And as always, thank you for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for September 29th through October 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 1 ounce gold Philharmonics are just $75 over spot. Next, 90% silver US half dollars are just 69 cents over spot per ounce. And finally, the silver Australian Year of the Snake coin for 2025 is just $5.99 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.